Marcus Wellington stood frozen outside his daughter's bedroom door at 2:47 a.m., his hand trembling on the doorknob, as he heard 3 words that shattered his world and mended it all at once. "Mommy's here," whispered Grace, the cook he'd hired. Just 2 weeks ago, her voice carrying through the crack in the door as his 6-year-old daughter Emma finally, for the first time in 8 months, stopped crying and drifted into peaceful sleep. Before we continue, if you enjoy deeply emotional stories about healing and unexpected family bonds, make sure to click that subscribe button. This is the best way for you to support our work. Thank you very much, and let's continue. 8 months earlier, Marcus Wellington had everything money could buy and nothing that truly mattered. The pharmaceutical empire he'd built from nothing had made him one of the youngest billionaires in the country. But success felt hollow when he buried his wife Sarah on a rain-soaked Tuesday in October. The funeral had been a blur of black suits and whispered condolences, but what haunted him most was the image of his daughter Emma, barely 6 years old, standing beside the casket in her tiny black dress, too young to understand why Mommy wouldn't. Wake up, too innocent to grasp the finality of goodbye. Sarah had been everything Marcus wasn't. Warm where he was distant, intuitive where he was analytical, patient where he was demanding. She had been the heart of their home, the one who knew exactly how to braid Emma's hair for school, which stories to read at bedtime, and how to turn tears into laughter with nothing more than a silly voice and a made-up song. When the cancer took her, it didn't just claim a wife and mother. It ripped the soul out of their family and left Marcus drowning in responsibilities he'd never learned to handle. The months that followed were a nightmare of failed attempts and growing desperation. Marcus threw money at the problem the only way he knew how, hiring a parade of nannies, housekeepers, and child care specialists. Mrs. Henderson lasted 3 weeks before Emma's screaming fits drove her to quit. Maria, a highly recommended nanny from an elite agency, made it through exactly 5 days before declaring the situation impossible. The behavioral therapists spoke in clinical terms about grief processing and attachment disorders, but their degrees and certifications meant nothing when Emma would wake up every night at 2 a.m., sobbing for her mother with a desperation that broke Marcus's heart a little more each time. Sleep became a luxury neither father nor daughter could afford. Emma would cry until exhaustion claimed her, only to wake again within hours, trapped in a cycle of grief that no amount of money could break. Marcus would pace the halls of his Manhattan penthouse, exhaustion weighing down his shoulders as he tried everything. Warm milk, bedtime stories, sleeping in her room, letting her sleep in his. Nothing worked. The dark circles under Emma's eyes grew deeper, her appetite disappeared, and Marcus watched helplessly as his little girl faded away before his eyes. The Wellington penthouse, once filled with Sarah's laughter and Emma's giggles, became a mausoleum of memories. The staff tiptoed around in silence, afraid to disturb the grief that hung over everything like a suffocating blanket. Marcus threw himself into work with even more intensity, staying at the office until midnight, attending board meetings in different time zones, anything to avoid the crushing weight of his failure as a father. But every night, he would return to find Emma inconsolable and the latest caregiver at their wits' end. It was Mrs. Patterson, his longtime housekeeper, who suggested they needed someone different. "That child doesn't need another nanny, Mr. Wellington," she said one morning as she found Marcus slumped over his coffee, red-eyed and defeated. "She needs someone who understands loss, someone who can cook more than just meals, someone who can nourish a broken heart." That's how Grace Hartwell came into their lives on a gray February morning, carrying nothing more than a single suitcase and references that spoke more about her character than her culinary skills. She was 28, with warm honey-colored hair that caught the light and gentle blue eyes that seemed to see right through the walls people built around their pain. She'd grown up in foster care, bouncing between homes until she aged out of the system, and had spent years working in family kitchens where she learned that food was just another language for love. When Marcus interviewed her in his sterile office, surrounded by awards and financial reports, Grace sat quietly as he rattled off the job requirements and Emma's difficulties. She didn't take notes or ask about salary. Instead, she simply said, "May I meet her?" Emma was curled up in the corner of the living room when Grace walked in, clutching a stuffed elephant that had belonged to Sarah. The little girl looked up with eyes that held too much sadness for someone so young, and Grace's heart broke in the most beautiful way. She didn't rush forward with forced cheer or overwhelming enthusiasm. Instead, she sat down on the floor, a respectful distance away, and began talking about the elephant. "He looks like he's been on quite an adventure," Grace said softly, her voice carrying the kind of warmth that made people want to lean in closer. "What's his name?" Emma hesitated, then whispered, "Peanut. Mommy gave him to me." "Peanut," Grace repeated as if the name held magic. "That's perfect. I bet he misses her too." Something in Grace's tone, the way she acknowledged Emma's loss without trying to fix it, made the little girl look up with curiosity instead of suspicion. "You can't miss someone if you don't know them," Emma said. testing this new adult with the brutal logic of children. "You're absolutely right," Grace agreed. "But sometimes we miss the love someone shared, even if we never met them. Your mommy must have loved you very much to give you such a special friend." It was the first time in months that Emma had engaged with anyone new, and Marcus, watching from the doorway, felt something shift in his chest. Not hope exactly, but the absence of hopelessness. Grace started slowly, respecting the delicate ecosystem of grief that had settled over the Wellington home. She didn't try to replace Sarah or pretend that food could heal all wounds. Instead, she began the patient work of rebuilding, one small gesture at a time. She learned Emma's routines, discovered that she liked her sandwiches cut into triangles, not squares, and that she would only drink milk from the purple cup with the butterfly handle. More importantly, Grace understood that cooking was just the beginning. She would hum while she worked, not loudly enough to disturb, but just enough to fill the oppressive silence with something gentle and alive. She would leave little notes in Emma's lunchbox, not demanding responses, just small reminders that someone was thinking of her. "Hope your day is as sweet as you are," or "Remember, you're braver than you believe." The first breakthrough came 3 days after Grace started, when Emma wandered into the kitchen while Grace was making dinner. The little girl had been drawn by the smell of something familiar. Chicken and dumplings, the same comfort food Sarah used to make during their rare family dinners. Emma stood in the doorway, torn between hunger and loyalty to her grief. "Would you like to help?" Grace asked, not looking up from her work. "I could use someone to tell me if I'm adding enough love to the pot." Emma crept closer, intrigued, despite herself. "How do you add love to cooking?" Grace smiled, still focused on stirring. "Well, love isn't really an ingredient you can measure. It's more about paying attention to what makes people happy. Like noticing that someone likes extra cheese on their pasta, or remembering that they don't like their vegetables too soft. Love is in the details." For the next hour, Emma helped in small ways, handing Grace spices, taste testing the broth, learning that cooking could be a conversation between hearts rather than just a chore. When Marcus came home that night, he found his daughter actually eating dinner instead of pushing food around her plate, and for the first time in months, the dining room didn't feel like a funeral parlor. But progress wasn't linear. There were still bad days, still nights when Emma would wake up screaming for her mother, still moments when grief would crash over her like a wave, leaving her gasping and inconsolable. Grace weathered these storms with quiet patience, never trying to rush Emma through her pain or offering empty platitudes about time healing all wounds. Instead, she began sharing small pieces of her own story. She told Emma about living in different homes, about how she used to cook imaginary meals for the family she dreamed of having, about learning that home wasn't a place but a feeling you carried with you. She spoke about loss in a way that acknowledged its weight without making it feel insurmountable. "I used to think that loving someone who was gone was pointless," Grace said one afternoon as they made cookies together, Emma carefully pressing star shapes into the dough. "But then I realized that the love doesn't disappear when someone does. It just changes shape, like water becoming ice or steam. It's still there, just different." Emma considered this with the seriousness that children bring to profound truths. "So Mommy's love is still here, even if she isn't?" "What do you think?" Grace asked, turning the question back to Emma. "Do you feel her love anywhere?" Emma touched her chest, right over her heart. "Sometimes, when I hold Peanut, or when I remember her singing to me. Then it sounds like her love. Didn't go anywhere at all. It just learned how to live inside you instead of outside you." These conversations happened in fragments, scattered between cooking lessons and quiet moments, never forced, but always available when Emma needed them. Grace had an intuitive understanding of how children processed grief, not in neat stages, but in spirals, circling back to the same pain from new angles, each time understanding it a little differently. Marcus watched this slow healing with a mixture of gratitude and guilt. He was grateful for Grace's gentle patience with Emma, but he felt increasingly aware of his own shortcomings as a father. He could provide financial security, educational opportunities, and material comfort, but he struggled with the emotional intimacy that seemed to come so naturally to Grace. Work became both his refuge and his prison. The Wellington Pharmaceuticals empire demanded constant attention, and Marcus told himself that providing for Emma's future was the most important thing he could do. But late at night, when he finally came home to find Grace reading bedtime stories or helping Emma with homework, he felt like a stranger in his own life. Grace noticed his distance, but didn't push. She understood that grief affected everyone differently, and that Marcus was fighting his own battles with loss and inadequacy. She made sure to update him on Emma's progress, sharing small victories and ongoing challenges. But she also respected his need to process his own pain in his own way. "She asked about Sarah today," Grace would report gently. "We looked through some photo albums together. She wanted to know if her mommy would be proud of the picture she drew at school." These updates were lifelines for Marcus, connections to his daughter's inner world that he felt increasingly locked out of. He wanted to be the one Emma turned to for comfort, but he also recognized that his own unprocessed grief made him too raw, too unpredictable, to be the steady presence she needed. The turning point came 6 weeks after Grace arrived, during a particularly difficult night when Emma's grief erupted with unusual intensity. She had been doing well during the day, playing and laughing, almost like her old self. But bedtime brought the familiar panic, the desperate crying for her mother that no amount of comfort seemed to ease. Marcus paced outside Emma's room, listening to his daughter's sobs and feeling utterly helpless. He had tried everything, sitting with her, reading stories, even lying down beside her, but nothing worked. The crying would continue until Emma exhausted herself, falling into a restless sleep that would last only a few hours before the cycle began again. Grace appeared. Beside him in the hallway, her presence calm and reassuring even in the midst of chaos. "May I try something?" she asked quietly. Marcus nodded, too tired and desperate to maintain his pride. He watched through the crack in the door as Grace entered Emma's room, not with the determined efficiency of the failed nannies, but with the gentle presence of someone who understood that sometimes comfort came not from fixing, but from witnessing. "I know, sweetheart," Grace said softly, sitting on the edge of Emma's bed. "It hurts so much, doesn't it? Missing someone you love." Emma's sobs slowed slightly, not because the pain had lessened, but because someone was finally acknowledging its depth instead of trying to make it go away. "Tell me about her," Grace said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Tell me about your mommy." Through her tears, Emma began to speak about Sarah, how she smelled like vanilla and sunshine, how she would make up silly songs about everyday things, how she promised she would always be there to chase away the monsters. As Emma talked, Grace listened with her whole being, asking gentle questions that helped the little girl paint a picture of the mother she missed so desperately. "She sounds absolutely wonderful," Grace said when Emma's words finally slowed. "No wonder you miss her so much. A love that big doesn't just disappear, you know. It stays with us, even when the person we love can't." "But I want her here," Emma whispered, the words breaking Marcus's heart from his position in the hallway. Of course you do," Grace agreed. "That's what love does. It makes us want to hold on to the people who matter most. But sometimes, when someone we love can't be with us the way they used to be, they find new ways to show us they care." Grace began to hum then, a soft melody that seemed to wrap around Emma like a blanket. It wasn't a song Sarah had sung. Grace was careful not to intrude on those sacred memories, but something new and gentle that belonged just to this moment, this healing. As the humming continued, Emma's breathing began to slow, her body finally releasing the tension that had held her captive for hours. Grace continued to sit beside her, one hand gently stroking Emma's hair, her presence steady and undemanding. And then, in a voice so soft Marcus almost missed it, Grace whispered the words that would change everything. "Mommy's here, baby, in your heart, in your memories, in all the love that will never go away. Mommy's here." Emma's breathing deepened, her small body finally surrendering to the sleep that had eluded her for so long. For the first time in 8 months, she slept through the night, peaceful and whole, cradled by the gentle understanding that love transcends physical presence. Marcus stood in the hallway, long after Grace had quietly slipped away, processing what he had witnessed. It wasn't that Grace had replaced Sarah or somehow erased Emma's grief. Instead, she'd given his daughter something even more precious, the understanding that love doesn't end with loss, that the bonds we form with those we cherish become a part of who we are, carried forward in our hearts like an eternal flame. In the days that followed, everything began to shift. Emma still missed her mother, still had moments of sadness and longing, but the desperate panic that had characterized her grief began to ease. She started sleeping through the night more often. Her appetite returned, and the light in her eyes grew brighter with each passing day. Grace continued her patient work, but now Emma met her efforts halfway, engaging more readily in conversations about feelings, memories, and the complex landscape of love and loss. They established new rituals, cooking Sarah's favorite recipes together while sharing stories about her, creating a memory book filled with photos and drawings, and having regular conversations about the different ways people we love stay with us, even when they can't be physically present. Marcus found himself drawn into this healing process, inspired by Grace's example to engage more deeply with his own grief and his relationship with Emma. He began joining their cooking sessions, sharing his own memories of Sarah, and slowly learning how to be present with his daughter's emotions, instead of trying to fix them. The change in their family dynamic was profound. Where once there had been careful distance and unspoken pain, now there were genuine conversations, shared laughter, and the kind of comfortable intimacy that comes from walking through darkness together and emerging into light. Grace's role in their lives evolved naturally from cook to caregiver to something that defied easy categorization. She wasn't trying to replace Sarah, no one could, but she was creating something new and beautiful, a safe space where Emma could learn to carry her mother's love forward while opening her heart to new connections. Marcus found himself increasingly grateful for Grace's presence, not just for what she had done for Emma, but for how she had helped him rediscover his own capacity for emotional connection. Watching her gentle patience with his daughter taught him new ways of being present, of offering comfort without trying to solve everything, of holding space for pain while also nurturing hope. As winter gave way to spring, the Wellington home transformed from a mausoleum of grief into a living space where love existed in multiple forms. The eternal love for Sarah that would always be part of their story, and the growing love for Grace who had helped them remember. That healing doesn't mean forgetting, but rather learning to carry our losses with grace while remaining open to new joy. Emma's 6th birthday arrived in May, the first since Sarah's death, and Marcus had been dreading it for weeks. How could they celebrate when the person who had made birthdays magical was gone? But Grace, with her intuitive understanding of how to honor the past while embracing the present, helped them create a celebration that felt both new and deeply connected to Sarah's memory. They made Sarah's favorite chocolate cake together, with Emma carefully measuring ingredients, while Grace shared stories about birthday traditions from her own childhood. They looked through photo albums, not with sadness, but with gratitude for the memories they held. And when Emma made her birthday wish, she whispered it to the small framed photo of Sarah that now sat on her nightstand, including her mother in the celebration in a way that felt natural and healing. That night, as Grace tucked Emma into bed, the little girl looked up with eyes that sparkled with something Marcus hadn't seen in almost a year. Genuine happiness mixed with peaceful acceptance. Grace, Emma said softly, do you think Mommy knows about you? Do you think she's happy that you're here? Grace considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. I think your mommy loves you so much that she would be happy about anything that helps you feel safe and loved. What do you think? Emma smiled, an expression of pure contentment that took Marcus's breath away. I think she sent you to us, like a present, but one that stays forever. As Grace kissed Emma's forehead and whispered her nightly blessing, sweet dreams, beautiful girl. You are so loved. Marcus realized that his daughter had found something he had thought was lost forever, the ability to trust in love again, to believe that even after devastating loss, new connections could form without diminishing what came before. The transformation wasn't just in Emma. Marcus himself had begun to heal in ways he hadn't expected, learning from Grace's example how to be present with difficult emotions instead of burying himself in work. Their conversations over late-night coffee had become a sanctuary where he could process his own grief, his fears about fatherhood, and his growing gratitude for the woman who had saved his family. Grace had given them more than just meals and childcare. She had given them a roadmap for healing, a demonstration that love could exist in many forms, and the profound gift of watching Emma learn to trust in goodness again, in helping a little girl understand that Mommy's here in all the ways that truly mattered. Grace had created something beautiful. A family rebuilt not on the ashes of loss, but on the foundation of love that transcends every boundary, even death itself. As spring turned to summer, the Wellington home filled with laughter again, not as a replacement for what they had lost, but as a testament to what they had found, the understanding that healing doesn't mean forgetting, that new love doesn't diminish old love, and that sometimes the most broken families can become the most beautiful when they're rebuilt with patience, understanding, and the kind of grace that sees light even in the deepest darkness. Emma slept peacefully every night now, no longer afraid that love was something that could be taken away, but confident in the knowledge that the people who truly care about us find ways to stay close, whether in memory, in heart, or in the gentle presence of those who help us remember that we are never truly alone.